It took me 4 long years, a brutal surgery, and the most crushing betrayal of my life to realize it, but Chloe never actually loved me. She loved the version of me that looked good on Instagram, the accessory that made her friends jealous. And the second that version disappeared, she couldn't wait to trade me in. I'm Liam, and this is how I learned that some people only love you when you're a perfect reflection of what they want. Let me take you back to the beginning. I was 23, fresh out of college, working my first real job at a tech startup in Charlotte. I was in the best shape of my life then, honestly, because I had nothing else to do but work and hit the gym. I was that guy, morning runs before work, meal prepping on Sundays, posting gym selfies that, got way too many likes. Chloe noticed me at a coffee shop near my office. She worked in marketing for some boutique agency. She walked right up, complimented my physique, asked if I competed, and within 2 weeks, we were inseparable. Looking back, it's so clear now. She talked about my appearance constantly, like it was my most valuable trait. She'd go on and on about how I looked like I walked off a magazine cover, how all her friends were so jealous she was with me. At the time, I thought it was sweet, you know? Like she was just proud to be with me. She posted us everywhere, Instagram stories, Facebook photos, always angled so my arms or shoulders were visible. Always with captions about couple goals or her king. Her comment sections would just blow up with fire emojis. I really thought we were building something genuine. But here's what I missed: she never once posted about my personality, my sense of humor, how I treated her. It was always about aesthetics. By year 2, I started thinking seriously about the future. I dropped hints about moving in together, talked about what kind of house we'd want someday. She was always enthusiastic but vague, saying yes, definitely when the timing is right, but never actually committing to anything concrete. Year 3 rolled around, and I brought up marriage directly over dinner at this upscale bistro we loved. She smiled, but immediately deflected. She explained we were still young, needed to focus on careers, build savings first. That there was no rush when we were basically married already. And I accepted that. It made some sense, right? But then year 4 came, and I noticed her friends were getting engaged left and right, posting ring photos and planning weddings. Whenever I mentioned it, she'd dismiss them, saying they were just rushing because they were insecure, or that marriage didn't mean anything if you weren't financially stable. Which seemed reasonable, except she never defined what stable enough actually meant. I didn't see it then, but she kept moving the goalpost. What was she really waiting for? Then everything changed. I needed surgery. I'd been having this persistent pain in my lower abdomen for months. I ignored it, like an idiot, because I was busy and figured it was just stress until one night it got so bad I ended up in the ER. They found out I had a complicated hernia that required immediate surgical repair. The surgery itself went fine, but the recovery was brutal in ways I was just not prepared for. They put me on pain medication that made me foggy and tired. I was told absolutely no heavy lifting or intense exercise for at least 4 months. Between the medication, the pain, and the depression that came from suddenly being unable to do the one thing that made me feel good about myself, I spiraled pretty hard. I couldn't work out, couldn't move the way I used to. I spent most evenings on the couch watching TV and eating takeout because cooking felt like too much effort, and Chloe wasn't exactly stepping up to help with meals. The weight came on faster than I expected, maybe 35 pounds over about 7 months. I went from having visible abs to a soft stomach and a rounder face. And suddenly, Chloe's entire energy toward me shifted. At first, it was small comments, disguised as jokes. Little digs about me enjoying those recovery meals a little too much, or suggesting maybe it was time to think about getting back to the gym. I'd laugh it off and explain that I was still in pain, still working through physical therapy, that my doctor said I needed to ease back into exercise slowly. But she kept pushing. By month 8, she wasn't joking anymore. She made pointed comments about how I looked in photos, saying stuff like, "Can we not post this one?" when really she just meant I looked heavier. She started pulling away physically, less affection, less intimacy, more time on her phone or out with friends. When I tried to talk to her about it, she'd brush it off, saying she was just stressed with work. But I could feel the real reason hanging in the air between us. Her friends started asking questions too, apparently, because she told me one night that people were wondering what happened to me. She said it like it was my fault for embarrassing her. I tried explaining again, walked her through the whole medical situation, the chronic pain I was still managing, the mental health struggle of losing the one thing that gave me confidence. She listened with this blank expression and then dismissed it, saying, "Everyone has problems, that's not an excuse to just give up on yourself." Like my literal medical recovery was some kind of character flaw. The distance between us grew into this massive, cold gap. We were barely talking, barely touching, just existing in the same apartment like roommates who didn't particularly like each other. I started feeling like I was some kind of failed project she'd invested in that didn't pan out. Then came the night that changed everything. We were supposed to have dinner together at home, actually sit down and reconnect. I brought up the future again, because I still loved her, still wanted to believe we could work through this. I said something like, "Where do you see us in a year? Do you think we're heading toward marriage?" And she put down her fork, looked at me with this expression that was half pity and half disgust, and said, "I can't be tied to someone who let himself go like this, Liam." Just flat out. No sugarcoating. I sat there stunned, processing what she'd just said. She continued, explaining she needed a partner she could be proud of, someone who takes care of himself. And right now, I wasn't that person. I realized in that moment that everything I'd suspected was true. I wasn't a person to her. I was an accessory, a status symbol. Something to show off when I looked good, and hide when I didn't. But that wasn't even the worst part. A few days later, I was home early from a doctor's appointment and I heard her on the phone in the bedroom, laughing with someone. I stopped in the hallway when I heard my name. She was talking to one of her friends. I don't know which one. And she said, "Honestly, I can't marry him like this. Can you imagine the wedding photos? I'd look like I settled for whatever I could get." Her friend must have said something because Chloe laughed and continued, "He got fat after his surgery. And I get it was medical, but it's been months and he's still making excuses. I'm not going to tie myself to someone who doesn't even try." I stood there, frozen in our hallway, listening to the woman I'd spent 4 years with reduce our entire relationship to my appearance and her social standing. I didn't burst in. I didn't confront her right then. I just walked back to the living room quietly and sat down. And something inside me fundamentally shifted. That's when I understood that Chloe had never loved me. She'd loved the version of me that made her look good. And the second that version disappeared, she couldn't wait to trade me in. Real partners don't abandon you during a medical crisis. They show up, even harder. After I heard Chloe tell her friend I was too fat to marry, I didn't blow up or make a scene. I just made a decision that night that would change everything. The next morning, I confronted her. I asked her straight up if she really felt that way about me. Instead of apologizing or showing any remorse, she did this thing where she tried to spin it like she was doing me a favor. She said she was just trying to motivate me, that she wanted me to be the best version of myself. And then came the line that made everything crystal clear. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Lose the weight. Then we can talk about marriage." Like our future together was some kind of reward I had to earn by meeting her physical standards. I realized right then that I was done trying to win her approval. But I also realized something else. I did want to get back in shape. Not for her. Not to save this dying relationship. But because I missed feeling strong and healthy and like myself. So I told her, "Fine, I'll work on it." But inside, I knew I was doing this for completely different reasons than she thought. That same week, I moved most of my stuff to my buddy Finn's place. I told Chloe I needed space to focus on my health. Honestly, I just couldn't stand being around her anymore. Couldn't stand the judgmental looks, the cold shoulders, the feeling like I had to earn basic human decency. I started researching how to safely get back into fitness after surgery. The last thing I needed was to hurt myself and end up worse off. I found a physical therapist named Ethan who specialized in post-surgical rehabilitation. When I met with him for the first time, he didn't judge me or make comments about my weight. He just asked about my pain levels, my range of motion, what my goals were. He created this whole program for me that started super slow, basically just stretching and light movement, building up my core strength that had been wrecked by the hernia surgery. He kept reminding me that recovery was a marathon, not a sprint. Pushing too hard, too fast would only set me back. It felt good to have someone in my corner who actually cared about my well-being instead of just how I looked. I also started seeing a nutritionist because I knew I couldn't just crash diet my way back. I needed to do this right. She helped me figure out meal planning that actually worked with my schedule and my budget. The first few weeks were brutal, not because of the physical work, but because I was breaking years of bad habits I'd developed during recovery: late-night eating, using food as comfort when I was in pain or depressed, ordering takeout instead of cooking. But slowly, really slowly, things started to change. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. and hit the gym before work. It was empty and quiet and kind of lonely. But there was something peaceful about it. Like I was doing this thing just for me, with no audience, no performance. The first time I managed a full workout without any pain, I actually teared up a little in my car afterward because it felt like getting a piece of myself back. That's when I knew Ethan's approach was working. He'd identified issues my previous physical therapy had missed, muscle imbalances and compensation patterns that were actually making my recovery harder. Around week 6, I'd lost maybe 10 pounds. Nothing dramatic, but I could feel the difference in how my clothes fit, how I moved. And that's when Chloe started reaching out more. I was still staying at Finn's most nights, but I'd go back to the apartment to grab clothes or check mail. Suddenly, she was interested again. Texting me during the day, asking how the gym went, suggesting we grab dinner somewhere nice, touching my arm when we'd cross paths like she used to. She started posting about us again on social media, stuff like thinking of you with old photos, and her friends would comment asking if we were okay. She'd respond with vague positive stuff. It was so transparent it almost made me laugh. Like she thought I couldn't see exactly what she was doing. By month 3, I'd lost about 25 pounds and was honestly in better shape than before the surgery because I was being so intentional about everything: proper form, adequate rest, balanced nutrition. And Chloe was acting like nothing bad had ever happened between us. She wanted to meet up more, wanted to talk about us, kept hinting that maybe I should move back into the apartment. One night she called and said she wanted to take me somewhere special. Said we needed to celebrate my progress and talk about our future. I almost said no. But a part of me needed to see this through. Needed to confirm what I already suspected about her motives. We met at this upscale steakhouse somewhere we'd never been before. She showed up looking incredible, wearing this dress I'd complimented once like 2 years ago, hair and makeup done like she was going to a gala. We sat down, and she was being extra affectionate, reaching across the table to hold my hand, laughing at my stories. I just watched her perform, because that's what it was, a performance. Then she started talking about how proud she was of me, how I'd proven I could commit to something and see it through, how I'd shown her the man I really was. There was this weird, rehearsed quality to her words, like she'd practiced this speech. "You've really shown me who you are, Liam." I realized with this sinking feeling what was building here. She thought this was the reconciliation dinner. Thought that now that I looked good again, we'd just slide back into the relationship like the last year hadn't happened. Like she hadn't abandoned me when I needed support most. I excused myself to the bathroom and just stood there, looking in the mirror. I had this moment of total clarity. I'd lost the weight. I'd done the work. I'd proven whatever she thought I needed to prove. But none of it changed the fundamental truth that she'd only ever valued me for my appearance. When I came back to the table, she was fiddling with her napkin, nervous energy radiating off her. Before she could launch into whatever came next in her script, I told her we needed to talk honestly about us, about what this really was. She lit up, Probably. Thinking I was about to say I wanted to move back in. But instead, I started asking questions. I asked her what she loved about me, what she valued in our relationship, why she wanted to be with me. Every single answer came back to surface-level stuff: how good we looked together, how I motivated her to stay fit, how people admired us as a couple, how proud she was of my transformation. Nothing about my personality, my values, how I treated her, the life we built together over 4 years. She didn't even seem to realize how shallow it all sounded. Then I asked her point blank, what would happen if I got sick again? If I had another medical issue? If life happened and I couldn't maintain this physique forever? She actually hesitated. Had to think about it before saying, of course I'd support you. But I could see in her eyes she was lying. Could see her mentally calculating whether that was the right answer. I knew right then that I couldn't do this anymore. Couldn't spend my life with someone who saw me as a reflection of her own status rather than as an actual human being. The dinner ended awkwardly. Her confused about why I seemed distant. Me just trying to get through the rest of the night. When we left, she tried to suggest coming back to her place, tried to salvage whatever she thought this was. But I told her I needed time to think and I'd call her soon. I didn't call. 2 weeks of silence passed, and Chloe must have been losing her mind because she started ramping up the pressure, texting about how we needed to talk, how she had something important planned, how she wanted to celebrate us properly. Finally, she called and practically begged me to meet her for one more dinner. Said she'd made reservations somewhere special. I agreed because I knew I needed to end this cleanly. Needed closure for both of us. She picked this trendy rooftop bar overlooking Charlotte, somewhere we'd gone on our first anniversary. I knew exactly what she was planning because she'd been dropping hints all week about big moments and new chapters and fresh starts. I let her think I was clueless. Let her get excited about whatever she had planned because I needed to see this through to understand, once and for all, that I was making the right choice. We got to the restaurant, and she was practically glowing. Kept touching my arm, laughing too loud at things that weren't that funny. I could see her checking her purse every few minutes like she had something precious hidden inside. The waiter brought our drinks, and she launched into this whole speech about my transformation, about how inspired she was by my dedication, about how I'd become the man she always knew I could be. And every word just confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't celebrating me as a person. She was celebrating that I'd returned to being the accessory she wanted, the trophy boyfriend who made her look good in photos. Then she reached into her purse. And I knew this was it. She was about to pull out a ring or push for some grand romantic gesture. Before she could say another word, I just said it. Said no. Flat and simple. She froze with her hand still in her purse, this confused smile stuck on her face like she'd misheard me. She asked what I meant. What was I saying no to? I told her I was saying no to all of it. To the performance, to the conditional love, to spending my life with someone who only valued me when I looked a certain way. I told her I'd heard every cruel thing she'd said to her friends. Seen how she treated me when I was at my lowest. Watched her check back in only when I became visually acceptable again. And I was done pretending that was love. The confusion on her face shifted to anger real quick. She hissed at me that I was embarrassing her, that people were watching, that we should talk about this at home. But I was done talking in private where she could manipulate the narrative and rewrite history. I stood up, put cash on the table for my half of the bill, and walked out while she sat there frozen. I could feel every eye in that restaurant on us. But for once, I didn't care what anyone thought. I only cared about my own self-respect. My phone started blowing up before I even got to my car. Texts from her mom, from her friends. All saying basically the same thing, that I was ungrateful, that I'd humiliated her after everything she'd done for me, that I owed her an explanation at minimum. The entitlement in those messages was almost funny. Like I owed her something for the privilege of her conditional affection. I turned my phone on silent and drove straight to Finn's place. I knew I needed to be around someone who actually knew me, who'd seen how Chloe treated me this past year, and understood why I had to walk away. Finn took one look at my face and just handed me a beer, let me sit on his couch, and decompress without asking a million questions. After about an hour, I finally told him everything, the whole story from the surgery to the weight gain to the overheard phone call to tonight. He listened and then said something that hit me hard. He said, "She loved your abs more than she ever loved you, man." Hearing someone else say it out loud made it feel more real somehow. Made me realize I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did. I crashed at Finn's that night because I wasn't ready to deal with whatever meltdown Chloe might be having. The next morning, I knew I had to face it eventually. Had to get the rest of my stuff from the apartment and make this official. I called my brother, Caleb, who lives about an hour outside Charlotte, and asked if he'd come help me move. Not because I thought Chloe would get violent, but because I knew she'd try to manipulate me if I went alone, try to cry or apologize or make promises she had no intention of keeping. Caleb agreed immediately. Said he'd never liked her anyway, and he was glad I was finally seeing clearly. We drove over to the apartment. Around noon on a weekday, when I figured Chloe would be at work. I used my key to get in, planning to just pack up my remaining clothes, documents, and important stuff and get out fast. But what I found inside changed everything. The place looked like someone had a complete breakdown. Pillows thrown off the couch. Pictures of us knocked over on the counter. Empty wine bottles on the coffee table. And there on the kitchen table was her laptop, sitting open. I wasn't planning to snoop. Wasn't even thinking about it. But the screen was right there facing me, and I saw it was open to a dating app profile, already created, with recent photos of her, filters set to athletic build and six-figure income. My stomach just dropped. I couldn't help myself. I scrolled through and saw messages, full conversations with other guys, that went back months. Back to when I was still recovering from surgery and at my heaviest. She was complaining about me to complete strangers, saying she was stuck with someone who'd let himself go, asking guys if they wanted to meet up for coffee or drinks, fishing for validation and attention while I was struggling through the worst medical and mental health crisis of my life. Some of these messages were from 8-9 months ago, when I was at my absolute lowest point, when I couldn't work out and was in constant pain and felt like I'd lost myself completely. And she was already shopping for my replacement. Caleb saw my face and asked what was wrong. I just turned the laptop toward him, let him see what I was seeing. He got angry in a way I rarely saw from my brother. Started saying she was garbage and I deserved better and we should expose her online. But I told him, no. I didn't need revenge. Didn't need to drag her publicly. I just needed proof for myself that leaving was the right call. Needed evidence in case she tried to rewrite history later and make me the villain. I took photos of the conversations on my phone, screenshots of her dating profile, documentation of exactly who she was when she thought I'd never find out. Then I grabbed my clothes, my documents, my gaming console, anything that mattered to me, and we loaded up Caleb's truck. We were almost done, probably 15 minutes from leaving forever, when Chloe showed up. She must have gotten some kind of alert that someone was in the apartment. Or maybe her mom had driven by and tipped her off. Because she came storming in, demanding to know what I thought I was doing, saying I had no right to be there without telling her, saying I was invading her privacy. The irony of that last part almost made me laugh. I stayed calm. I told her I'd seen the dating apps. Seen the messages to other guys. Seen that she'd been lining up my replacement since before I'd even started losing weight. And she actually tried to justify it. She said, "You weren't being the partner I needed." What was I supposed to do? Like her emotional cheating was somehow my fault for being injured, for being human, for not maintaining the aesthetic she required. That's when I really let her have it. Not yelling, but cold and clear in a way I'd never spoken to her before. I told her she called me an embarrassment when I was recovering from surgery. Told her friends she couldn't marry someone who let himself go. Measured my entire worth by my appearance. and checked out of our relationship the second I stopped being Instagram worthy. I told her I'd lost the weight, but more importantly, I was losing her. And honestly, she taught me exactly what kind of partner I never wanted to be with again, someone who loved conditionally, who treated people like accessories, who abandoned ship the moment things got difficult. She tried the tears. Then the whole "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it" routine. Reaching for my arm like physical touch would somehow undo months of emotional cruelty. But I stepped back and told her we were done. Officially over, completely finished. I said I'd already moved out weeks ago. This was just collecting the last of my stuff. And if she tried to contact me again, I'd block her on everything. Caleb and I walked out with her standing in the doorway, still trying to get the last word, still trying to make herself the victim in a story where she'd been the villain all along. As we drove away, I felt this massive weight lift that had nothing to do with the gym or the diet or the physical transformation. 3 months later, I'm living in my own apartment in a different part of Charlotte, still working out, but because I genuinely enjoy it now, because it makes me feel good and strong and healthy, not because I'm trying to prove anything to anyone or meet someone else's standards. I'm doing well at work, got a promotion, actually started seeing a therapist to work through some of the damage that relationship did to my self-worth, and I'm learning what healthy love actually looks like. I ran into Ethan, my physical therapist, at a coffee shop a few weeks ago, and we got to talking. He introduced me to his sister, Maya, who works in graphic design and just moved to Charlotte. We exchanged numbers, grabbed coffee once, and there might be something there eventually. Something that feels easy and genuine and based on actual compatibility rather than how we look together in photos. What does conditional love mean to you?